Good Friday morning, guys. Welcome to Real Talk. This is an insider's guide to real estate life and the pursuit of happiness. It's presented by the Yes Team Realtors. Keith and Yonna Smith, trusted advisors in the real estate game. Real Talk, guys, airs Tuesdays and Fridays at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love CVille Network, where we have a Charlottesville, Commonwealth, America, and worldwide audience. Judah Wickower, let's go to the studio camera. Judah's our director. Let's welcome Keith Smith, the distinguished gentleman, to the program. Keith, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, my friend. All this, I'm sitting here watching you do your thing, and I'm looking at cameras here and phones there, and
a lot of technology.
A lot of technology.
We're just under $40,000 here. We did a total the other day, just under 40K. Everything you see here.
Yeah, and then I think you said
we got a new car on set, pretty much, brand new car.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. But I think this Instagram thing I'm super pumped about. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I call it thing because it's way above my pay grade.
Yeah. Make sure you're talking into that mic so we can hear you on Facebook here. We got you good on Instagram.
Okay. There you go. Yes, sir. Aye, sir. So let me adjust this real quick. I don't want Judah to get yelled at me here for a second. Is that better, guys?
That's good.
There you
good.
Go. Yeah. So I mean, what you have like 11? Like the third largest?
We have the third largest Instagram in Charlottesville. UVA and the city of Charlottesville are ahead of us. We have just over 12,100 people on our Instagram. And then we'll take this content from Instagram and we'll syndicate it on a couple of other Instagram pages. So you get the live effect and the evergreen nature of the content, which is why people are seeing the distinguished gentleman on every spot out there.
Well, thank you. I just, we talked about this the other day. I mean, we're coming up on our second year, and 2 years ago, I never thought it would be this, right? I just thought, Keith and Jerry will BS, and I got a Facebook message from somebody, believe it or not, out in Portland Seattle, that I bumped into when I was out in Seattle, who now watches the show.
That's awesome.
And sent me, hey, I'm going for my run this morning. I'm going to watch the show, and it's not my daughter.
Yeah.
But I was doing me. So we're super excited about today. This is something that I'm super passionate about. Affordable housing, figuring out a way to increase our inventory, and we're going to bring a gentleman on out of Portland, which has the misfortune of being a good, close, personal friend. He actually likes Yonna much better than
he's on the West Coast. That's how much he likes you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 7:20 his time.
That's right, and you guys did a test call.
Probably 25 minutes ago.
Yeah,
so
sure.
before 7.
So, I don't want to take too much thunder away from Robert. He's just a great guy, and, we say about this all the time when we start bringing our guests on, you're going to have to control Robert and I because we'll just end up burning an hour talking about hazelnuts and all this kind of stuff and not focus on it. But this is some really exciting news.
Who is he?
Yeah, so I'm going to let him do that.
Okay.
I don't want to take that away from him. But we're going to talk about, and he was instrumental in getting this new, we call it so RIP. But I was schooled the other day on this. They call it RIP. So they don't call it. So when you and I think in RIP, we're thinking rest in peace.
Yeah.
It's called RIP.
Okay.
So
residential infill project.
Yeah. So what, in essence, and we'll get into the detail, what happens here is they're going to allow on single-family detached lots, like something out in Belmont, to build up to 6 homes on that. So there's a bunch of criteria which we're going to dig into, and my hope is really be able to follow some information off of the feed, people jumping in, and we'll just see how it goes.
Okay, I love it. Give it a like and a share, guys, on any of those Facebook pages. Give it a like, give it a share. J-Dubs, if you can join us on screen, on set real quick, as I reach out to Robert, get his tripod a little closer to him. And let's get that mic positioned in a little better spot, getting some feedback from the feed there, and particularly on Instagram.
So I think we need to get that.
I think we need to get that a little closer to him to work with the echo. So it's a little closer to the mic, and then get his mic a little closer to the mouth there as well, and then we're good to go. Instagram, thank you for letting us know that. We certainly appreciate that. I'm going to reach out to the guests. So who we're going to have in Instagram, if you're watching, Go to ilovecville.com if you want to hear from Robert Liberty. That's where we're going to archive the show. The Portland's residential infill project, I'm going to put this up here for you to see, and it's just a way to create more density across the city potentially. And if we have more housing stock, prices should stabilize and not increase, and there should be more affordable to live here. Johnny, your client says, good morning, Batman, Robin, and Alfred.
And Alfred.
I see that, Johnny. Thank you very much. Johnny, we love when you watch today's broadcast. I'm going to reach out to Robert now, if you're cool with that. You like this guy.
Don't tell him this, but I love him. So are we still echoing on
we're figuring that out. I think it's coming from your side there.
It is. I think it is too. I think somehow or another we've got to be able to shut off our speaker because I think it's picking me up.
I'm going to reach out to Robert Liberty now and see if we can get him on. Robert Liberty is going to be on the West Coast. So this gentleman is joining us from the West Coast, which is pretty awesome here. Robert Liberty is on the line, looking sharp, looking dapper. Robert Liberty is. Can I get a thumbs up to welcome Robert to the show, Judah Wickower? I do have a thumbs up now from Judah Wickower. Robert, you are live, of course, in Charlottesville, of course, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, across the country, and the world here on the I Love CVille Network. Thank you for joining us from the West Coast. You're 3 hours earlier than us. We certainly appreciate your time. How about an introduction, Robert, of who you are personally before we talk shop?
Okay, glad to do that, Jerry, and thank you for having me on the show. I was born in Portland and lived in the Northwest most of my life, and my career has been related to, hi, Keith. I've spent almost 40 years working to take the ideas, goals, and policies, land use and transportation plans and turn them into a real place, into reality. And I've done that in a variety of ways. I've been an attorney, a director of a nonprofit. I've worked for a member of Congress. I've been an elected official. And now I'm doing this work as a volunteer only because of Keith Smith.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very big company because if it's relatively early morning here and I'm talking to a Brooklyn-born realtor, by the end of the show I may be owning a contaminated wetland in New Jersey with a rare frog on it.
The paper's actually on its way to you, so just sign it. It'll be okay. Don't worry. Everything will be okay.
Robert, this man can sell ketchup to a princess wearing white gloves. He is that good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I am 2,600 miles away, a safe distance, although with DocuSign, you never know.
You know, DocuSign in this, Robert, right? You know, who knew that we could, do this stuff and go ahead and do it. Look, I think you're not doing yourself justice. You need to tell a little bit more. You're a little bit more exciting than what you just did. I mean, you're a Harvard grad lawyer, right?
Yeah, I generally don't mention that, certainly when I'm on my bike, since it's pretty easy to hit me with a car at 30 miles per hour. Yes, I have some fancy college degrees. That does not add any. I can tell you that was not mentioned in my campaign here. But I've worked with Keith and with others last couple of years on accessory dwelling units. Keith came out to Portland 3 times, I think, 2 or 3 times.
A little more than that, actually.
And we worked with teams in Charlottesville, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and then, of course, in Portland, trying to increase the supply of ADUs to overcome the barriers. And I'm working right now, I have a contract with AARP to update their model state act for accessory dwelling units and their model local ordinance. In fact, it's on my papers are on the table right here. So I don't know if that's exciting. I can make up some stories, the alien abduction, the grizzly bear fight, and so on, but we probably don't have time for that.
Oh, no, we got plenty of time. This is a long format, so we can kind of chat. That's one of the beautiful things about this show is that we don't get it down into 15-second sound bites. We can go and do this. But you also helped your state senator a little bit, didn't you not? Were you not on his staff at one point?
I was on the staff of my member of Congress,
Member of Congress.
Blumenauer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who started the Livability Caucus and the Bike Caucus, and he's still in Congress. He's started his career in 1973, voting for our statewide land use planning program, which I know is probably, for a lot of people, sounds like the beginning of the death through boredom, but actually it's much celebrated here, and the fact that he's still active is important, and that's been a theme in his career, which is he cares about a lot of things, including international issues, but building livable communities is one of his priorities, and things that were seen as kind of kooky West Coast ideas are now all across the country, including bicycles as a real form of transportation. The other thing about Earl is that, I'm going to use his first name because everyone on his staff calls him that, he's very Oregonian, that he's very, no pretense, no false airs, very focused. And once I was in D.C., and I worked on his staff in Portland, but I was in D.C., and I was heading out in the hall while he was leaving. Well, he's wearing a suit, and he's pushing his bike to the elevator because he's going to a meeting. And these people turned to me and say, is that a congressman? I said, yes. And they said, can we take a picture? And I said, Earl, I want to take a picture. And he said, fine. So I realized, when you take a Portlander and move them to Washington, D.C., you look a little bit like an alien. But have really spread now, and that's no longer a unusual idea to think of bikes as part of our transportation system.
On my way walking from a cup of coffee from MarieBette, there was two guys on a bike, and I'm now getting into biking because I can't run any longer. And so I become one of these bike guys or bike people. I stopped and said, wow, tell me about your bike. And I was actually a little late for the show because we kind of got chatting about the bike. So look,
I'll add one thing because it does connect a little bit with our discussion. Cars are very expensive to operate. Most trips in cities are just a few miles. And I had been a bike commuter for 25 years, and I'm commuting as coming from the kitchen to this table. But the last couple of years, when we had better and better bike paths, a separate bridge that had no cars and trucks on it, I was kind of bemused because I'd be cycling to work and I'd see these people move past me. And, I thought, oh, it's some, 30-year-old, 25-year-old guy in spandex. And no, I would look at the back of their head and they had gray hair. So, and they were not, it wasn't a recreational, they were out going to work or doing an errand. And so I have a lot more company now.
So we're here to talk about the residential infill project,
I can't wait.
Or as we refer to it as the RIP, which apparently you schooled me the other day. It's called the RIP, not the RIP with a tombstone. But somebody needs to hire a really good marketing guy and try to do something with that.
I also like housing, and this is a brilliant idea.
It is a brilliant.
And we've been talking about this, Robert. You're influencing people in Charlottesville.
So for those who are not deep into this or geeked out like you and I are on this stuff, give us a little bit of the genesis of how this came about, and then ultimately I want to try to get to the point of how can this actually work in Charlottesville or not.
And I think, I know this will come up, I think we should talk a little bit about the politics because, not partisan politics, but how to get something like this adopted, how does that work? That's usually the response is, well, it's a great idea, but maybe you can do it in Portland, where people fly fish with tofu on their. It's not going to work in the real world, which I think is not true at all. So the genesis is that.
So let me stop you there. Let me stop you there for that. Why is that? Why? Because that's what we want to talk about. Is this migratable? Is this possible to do around the country? I think I know the answer to that, but why do people think that this is
such huge change? It's such out-of-the-box thinking. It requires people like you to make it approachable and digestible. If you guys don't make this approachable and digestible and explain, one thing you have to really counter is how this is going to impact density of people in the area, the impact it's going to have on roads, the impact it's going to have on traffic, wear and tear, quality of life. But I think you counter that by saying the additional housing stock is going to keep the market affordable, and it's not going to price out middle America and under.
So how did Robin do?
Good. He hit most of the points. There's a little bit of a...
You taught me well, Keith.
We've honed our political arguments here, but I think we should come back to all of those.
Sure.
We should probably talk about parking, quality of life, density, and wear and tear, infrastructure. I think those are all important points. But there's some other things we need to talk about too, which is, are we being fair? How do we treat people? What can people afford? And who gets to be part of the conversation? And those are also very important to the outcome of the discussion, I think. So a little bit about the history. We have a history in this state going back, it's going to be close to 50 years now, saying, local control is great, but there's some things that are more important than what a local city councilor or county commissioner might be interested in short term. And so long term, we want to think about what kind of place this is. And one of the things that was tackled early on was residential zoning. Because, as was typical, and by the way, Oregon in 1973 was, you could call it Ohio with volcanoes. It really wasn't that different from the rest of the country. And, but one of the things that was recognized was a lot of communities, the new suburban communities, were not zoning land for apartments, for less expensive types of housing. They're going to zone, and this happens all over America, zone the entire place just for one class of people who could afford a big lot, a big house. And the others could go suck eggs. I mean, it just really was not thoughtful about the whole range of people in our communities. And so the state said, among other things, look, we've got to rethink this. We've got to have zoning that for everyone in every place. And that was like a lot of things we've done, it was not easy. It was very controversial, lots of fights in the legislature and in the ballot box. But that set the stage for what we're talking about now. So in the case of Portland, when they were acting on that, zoned a lot more land for apartments, which were built. It was market supplied housing all over the region, not just in Portland, in the suburbs as well. But in Portland, 1991 said we're going to allow accessory dwelling units on every lot. There's a bunch of conditions imposed on them. That turned out to be pretty difficult barriers. And the second thing they said was, if you own a corner lot, and I'm sitting here on a corner lot, you can have a duplex. So that's sat there for decades. And then there were some changes that were made that accelerated that construction of ADUs, which we can talk about. But there was a developer named Eli Spivak. And Eli is a homegrown developer. People think of developers as some guy in a flashy suit and a big car from out of state. Eli's he's from Washington, D.C. actually, but he started out with remodeling a little apartment complex into a set of homes for people, and he got on our planning commission, and he said we should rethink our residential zoning, because in the past we had all this variety of housing that was built. This is just the city of Portland. We had courtyard apartments, and we have fourplexes and duplexes and threeplexes, and we can't build any of that now, except for in tiny little areas next to arterials. We need to rethink this. And that led to the residential infill project. Whenever I think of residential infill project, I think that's a nice way of describing a graveyard. But anyway, so I agree on the marketing point. That blossomed for a year process in which, contrary, and Michael Anderson from the Sightline Institute has described this, instead of the proposal getting bigger, and then at the same time, the state of Oregon watching this, the Speaker of the House lives in Portland, and she felt strongly about housing costs and housing supplies because our housing had become as expensive as Charlottesville, or more expensive, I should say now. So they undertook a parallel effort to reform residential zoning statewide, which we can come back to. So these two things intersected, what was happening in Portland, which is only 15% of the state's population, and what was happening in the whole state of Oregon. We had this history of saying, local control has its limits, and there are some things that the state, your Commonwealth, thinks are more important. And one of them is choices in housing. So we're going to overrule local governments to try and stop all this. And Portland itself wanted to do this, wanted to be, it was also becoming, with the influx of population and tech people, our median income in the city was going like this, let's see, like that. rising really fast, and we were actually becoming whiter and whiter. One of the reasons we're such a white city is because minorities now live in the suburbs. So
That's Charlottesville. You just described Charlottesville, Robert.
yeah, I know, and I'm not surprised. And a lot of other places, high amenity places with good.
Well, you know Charlottesville well because you've been here multiple times. So you and I drove around these neighborhoods. So
beautiful city, and beautiful setting. So it's not surprising that people want to move there. Anyway, that's the genesis of it.
So I want to kind of tackle some of this, and I'm trying to see some questions come in here. But Judah, can you put the intro slide up on that? So there's some couple of slides we put together, and one of the things that keeps on coming back, and I've been, as you said, to Portland a couple of times.
That's on screen.
A few times, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is going to change the character of the neighborhood, right? And I don't really think that's the case. This is just a nice, pretty little slide that was put together by Sightline, which is a great little organization out there in Portland, a Sightline Institute. But if you go to slide number 1, what they do with this little graph here, or this little image that they did, is kind of taking what a neighborhood's going to look like if you do an ADU behind it, or if you do a duplex or a triplex or a quad or a duplex with an auxiliary dwelling unit. So it's I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong because you're the expert, this kind of thinking was not to increase the scale of structures in the property, so in the neighborhoods. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, in fact, it was described as the great compromise, although I'm not sure the opponents took it that way. As the graphic indicates, you could have built a house of 6,750 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot, which is gigantic. And one of the things that does is we have, as you know, we have a lot of beautiful landscaping here because the climate is mild. It's like a little bit like Virginia, and so people really like their yards. Well, these enormous houses with 1 or 2 people in them, and nationally about 3 out of 5 homes are just households or 1 or 2 persons. So it was really grating, and the advocates for the residential infill project never had a concern about giant houses for 1 or 2 people. So we said, okay, this is what we'll do. We'll shrink the max, but increase the number of homes that are possible within it. And that was what you see in that graphic. So the largest single-family home is 2,500 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot. And then after that, the square foot per unit size goes down. And that keeps a critical part of the character of the neighborhoods, which is the size of the structures, the amount of landscaping around them will be protected while we increase dramatically the possibilities of more housing units.
So you and I have had a bunch of conversations in person, on the phone. Affordable housing is a bit of a passion of mine, and more than a bit of a passion of mine. I sit on the Thomas Jefferson Community Land Trust, which is a nonprofit working on affordable housing. So how can, let's say if magically over time Charlottesville adapts some version of this, can this actually help the affordable housing? And I use the word crisis because I think that's what it is.
Definitely. We have a crisis. Yeah.
How does that work? Can this do that?
Well, there was some economists who looked at what it would do to the market. And actually there's a consulting firm here that does that work nationally, Echo Northwest. And it is true that when you have a really tight supply and you add increased housing supply, the effect takes a long time to be felt. But we've actually seen that with multifamily housing. Because we removed parking requirements and made it a lot easier to build a lot of mid-rise apartments, we actually saw, and before the beginning of the COVID recession, we actually saw rents dropping and vacancies increasing. I mean, they didn't drop a lot, but they stopped going up and then they headed down. So yes, adding to supply helps. But I think the other point's pretty simple, which is a 5,000 square foot lot in our neighborhood is $300,000. So if you put one house on that, you know what you're going to have to charge for the house. Sure. If you put 4 houses on that, you still make a hefty profit, and you can appeal to a much bigger market.
So the rule of thumb, Robert, so that you know, is somewhere between 4 to 5 times the price of the land.
Right.
Which, if you thumb through your MLS.
So you're talking 1.2 to 1.5 over there where he's
You know,
at.
in that price range is pretty much what's going for in some parts of Portland. I know in Seattle because I just came there from the kids. But
How do the taxes look, Robert? R1 single family detached versus this RIP concept. The taxes for the municipalities.
so what's the windfall for the?
That's what I mean.
For the city.
Yeah, because that's a huge component here.
Good thought.
Well, actually, there isn't. Because you collect a fixed amount, you take your budget and you divide it into your rate base. So if you have more, what it means is you're getting the same amount of revenue spread out over more property. Now, simplification. But the idea is that no, that's not how it works.
Okay.
You have a budget divided into tax base. So
It's based on assessed value.
That's what I'm saying. Aren't the four houses assessed higher than the one R1 at 1.2?
It depends on what the units are sold for. I think that's what Robert's trying to say. You know,
Okay.
if we're doing a $1.5 million house and lot, SFD, single family detached.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Robert. And if I turn it into a quad, is it more than 1.5?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Doesn't mean that the city is getting any more taxes. It may get more taxes from that, but then we'll get less taxes from somewhere else because you take the total budget and you divide it into the rate base. So if you have a lot bigger rate base, you have a lower tax rate. So I don't think revenue generation was a big part of it. In fact, there were discussions about impact on infrastructure, which you've alluded to.
Sure.
So what it does mean is that you might be redistributing the base, but we have the other reason that it's hard to discuss this in a rational way is back in the 90s, we borrowed a concept from California, a property tax limitation, put that in our constitution by narrow margin, and so it's kind of absurd. Now I will tell you something, Jerry, that does affect how this will work. We own 2 lots. That wasn't our plan. It was just that was a package. This was a very affordable house with 2 lots in a neighborhood that didn't, at that time, was seen as maybe up and coming, but not that great. When I was a boy, people thought this would be a slum with a freeway next to it. Anyway, our property tax on that vacant lot, which we've had offers for $300,000, is $480 a year.
What?
Oh, yeah.
That's because of the property tax limitation.
Yeah.
So my holding costs are nothing. I have no incentive to develop.
Sure.
I mean, the incentive, what I'm seeing on our block, we had a lot of vacant lots where people's side yards, 3 or 4 houses have been built in the last 2 years. That's just because the price has gotten so high, and then people sell and the lots sold separately. But the tax benefits or implications really have not been part of the debate at all, except for this question about if we're going to waive fees, how do you pay for things like parks?
Yeah, sure.
And roads?
Why don't we put this in perspective for the viewers? So my taxes on just under an acre in Albemarle County are basically $7,000 a year. This guy's taxes are $484 on that vacant lot. Is that what he said? $484?
It's under 500.
Yeah,
So-
that's pretty darn good.
So if Neil is watching, I would just really be curious Neil Williamson, I can't recite it off the top of my head, what the per thousand rate is in Charlottesville. I don't quite, but so,
Let me throw this question to Robert.
Sure.
So here's a tough question. I learned this from Batman over here, the distinguished gentleman. So Robert, you're saying that we're not necessarily going to have a windfall in revenue for the municipality.
but that's in Portland, so I think we're different, right? Because that same $150,000 lot in Belmont, and if somebody can dive into it, they'll probably find it on the GIS and the tax records, is not $500.
Oh, you're talking taxes.
Let me give you the full picture because I don't want to leave you with the property tax system is nuts because of the constitutional limitations
Sure.
and the legislature.
The point is we don't have that here.
Yeah, but the taxes we pay on this lot with this modest house are $5,000 a year. So $5,000. When that lot sells, it's going to get a new tax rate. So
Yep.
it'll be bumped back up. But what it did is as long as you've held it for a certain amount of time, you only get a little bit of increase. So this is not a fair system. It's a nutty system. But one of the consequences is for people who've owned lots for a long time is they can keep them forever because it costs almost nothing in property.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
there's no carrying cost, so they're doing nothing with the land. They're just keeping them vacant.
There's no incentive.
Yeah.
As soon as this sells, then the property taxes on that's going to be $3,000 or $4,000 a year.
Got it. So
So
I just think what we're trying to do is shove a 2x4 through eye of a needle, right? Because our structure, and that's kind of where I keep on going, is can this work here? We're a commonwealth.
Yeah.
Not only are we a commonwealth, we're a Dillon rule state,
Right.
Which makes things even
More difficult.
more difficult. And even from a technical perspective, could the city even do this due to those particular restrictions? But the
You're
kind of
saying, can city council, do they even have the autonomy to make these kind of changes?
Yeah,
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, and you know, much like I guess I'm trying to do, much like I'm a recovering developer, and Robert and I've had this recovering conversation before. And maybe I'm not so much recovering. Maybe I'm only in my first step, and I really think I'm in my 10th
Go
step.
to your developer meeting today.
Yeah.
Your recovery meeting.
I think we should start a program. I'm just saying. What do you think, Robert, huh?
past due, actually.
Robert.
See, I told you he's
I
fun.
like his humor. He's a funny dude.
He's a funny guy. Every once in a while, I've got to like,
Who you calling a funny guy?
I was like, hold it. Did he just insult me?
Well, he's a smart dude. You can tell. I mean, he's a Harvard guy over here.
Right. So, you know, are you a movie fan, Robert? I'm trying to remember.
Depends on the movie.
So, Goodfellas? You ever watch Goodfellas?
I've heard more about it.
Oh,
but
got
I've never
it. So
watched
there's
it.
a famous scene
That's
in
a
there
good
where Pesci, you know, where what is the guy's name? Leo?
Ray Liotta.
Right. Says,
Yeah.
do you make me funny? And
Do you think I'm funny?
you think I'm funny?
Yeah.
And if you get an opportunity, Google it and watch the clip. So Pesci, through the whole movie, was in character, never came out of character. And so that whole scene was ad-libbed. And
It terrified Ray Liotta.
It terrified the guy because he used to carry like a loaded gun with him. I mean, he was like,
He was a mobster.
I'm a mobster.
Yeah.
And he starts waving this in this scene. He starts waving, and it's the fear in this Ray Liotta's is real.
Yeah.
He's like, holy shit, this guy's going to shoot me. But it was.
This is why I love this guy. But since we have such a smart guy here, can we talk housing?
Oh, sorry.
Can we talk housing? Can I throw this
My
question to
attention
Robert?
deficit syndrome kicked in.
You told me to do this, to reel it in.
Yeah, before the show, I
In
said
the pre-production meeting.
in the pre-production meeting, you got to roll in. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Robert, here's the question. Give me the counter argument to this one. You know, people are going to say more traffic, more density, more wear and tear on infrastructure owned by the municipality. What's the counter argument to that?
Well, one of the counter arguments is, what's more important to you, a place for a car or a place for a family?
That was good, Robert. That's good.
Well, here's the fact. There is more land set aside for parking in the United States than for housing.
That's true.
We have 2 billion parking spaces, 2 billion for 250 million vehicles.
Wow.
So, you know, do you care more about, and this goes directly to the parking requirement. If you require people to build 1 or 2 off-street parking places, you've killed most of your ADUs on small properties. It's either geometrically impossible or it's cost prohibitive. And what we're saying is, I care more, you know, as an elected official, that cars have shelter than people.
Right.
So,
And that is just flat wrong.
so let's put some
The
real
other thing-
context to that, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is a direct
Yep.
trade-off. It's true for apartments as well. You require all this structured parking, no apartments.
So
So what we're saying is, it's more important to house a car than a person, a family. The second point is, when we were having a debate over another housing issue, which was to allow apartments without requiring parking in our neighborhood, I'm talking about 2-3 blocks away, on a very busy street. People, some of my neighbors, not direct neighbors, but in the neighborhood, were outraged about this. So one of my friends walked around and counted all the driveways that are empty. People, you know, they think they own the on-street parking that belongs to the public. They don't park in their own driveway, and then they complain about not having parking. So here's what's happened with the residential infill project is there's no parking required now. Just generally, we're just doing away with that. And in Edmonton, in Canada, last month, they eliminated all parking requirements for everything citywide, a city of a million. So people decided that, yeah, it's nice, but for structured parking of $50,000 a space, is that really our priority? Here's another point. When we built our ADU, it was in
You got an ADU too, Robert? This man's got a palace over there, doesn't he? He's got a great place. Double lot with an ADU.
150. I'll pay 150,000 for the lot.
After this, with the RIP, I could have hypothetically 10 units on the property.
Wow.
So
Pretty
anyway,
sure Con is not going to bite on that.
Is your wife going to let you do that?
His husband will bite.
Is your husband going to let you do that?
No, but he did say that as soon as I'm dead, he's selling everything and moving into a condo.
Robert.
And the question was, so when is that?
I think hospice care will last about one day and it will end with a pillow.
Robert.
Anyway, so
he loves you, man. Don't worry about it.
Our case, and I'm actually including this as part of the model state act and local ordinance. We had one car garage. This house was built in 1945. It was a typical, like a Levittown house, 850 square foot,
Sure.
Finished main floor. That's it. Unfinished attic and basement. By the way, it housed a three-generation family for a long decades. So we had a tuck-under garage cut into a bank. And they came out and said, based on where your lot line actually is, if we approve this, you won't have a parking space. So you're going to have to get a variance to have no parking for your house or the ADU. Zero. So I went out and took pictures and showed plenty of space on the streets. And they said, okay, that's fine. You get the variance. It wasn't a big deal. But this is a nice point. It said, you do have to pay to close your curb cut.
Oh, yeah.
Dig up your, ramp, dig that out, put in a curb. Now you have a parking space again. It's a public space. And I really liked that solution, which was we only had one parking space. We couldn't use it anyway because the cars had gotten so big that you put a car in there, you have to crawl out the back hatch. That this is a way of creating a public space for a private space. So this parking kills a lot of things. Another thing we haven't talked about is owner occupancy, which means that you have to for ADUs, the owner of the property has to live on site, either in the ADU or in the main house. And that's not required here. And people said, oh my God, you have people who are, not residents and, the property will go to hell. Well, we don't require that if people live in the main house or primary house. There's no requirement that if you own it, you live there. People rent out houses. So why do we treat those separately?
We have that same, and you and I have had this discussion before. Charlottesville does have an ADU ordinance, but that's the killer of it, right? The owner occupancy. And what Robert is basically saying is you can buy a regular single family.
Yeah, you're treating ADUs differently than R1 single family detached.
They're saying that this is for whatever reason, and I'm not so sure it's even legitimate, but for whatever reason, I personally think it violates fair housing, but that's a whole different issue than that. I really want to get back on this parking because I've got some real world examples for Charlottesville, right?
Yeah, the parking garage on Market Street, $50,000 per space in that garage for a $14 million price tag.
So I'm trying to dovetail this into the land trust,
okay, right?
And how we're trying to create affordable housing, and we'll put a couple of slides up here in a minute. But putting my recovering developer first step hat on, we spend our first conversation.
It's parking. That's nuts.
So the difference between here, Robert, and Portland, you have to have on-site parking,
right?
So there has to be parking on the parcel. So, Judah, if you wouldn't mind putting up slide 5. So to put some real-world local context to this, the Thomas Jefferson Community Land Trust, which I chair, is under contract to buy a couple of lots, and we're trying to produce 14 more affordable housing units here in Charlottesville. And so one of them in the picture that's on there, and I circled it in my crude little yellow there, is on the corner of 10th and Page. Yeah. So just to put a little context, Robert, and I'm not sure if we drove past this, but there's this really awesome project called Dairy Market that's getting built on the corner of Preston and 10th. It's a huge project. It's one of the sponsors of the show. Really some great stuff. Dining facilities, apartments. I think we did go by that, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
And so this is a parcel that's adjoining to that. So in that little yellow spot. But if you go to slide number 3.
How many parcels? That's one parcel there?
Oh, the one for Dairy Central?
Yeah.
Oh, it's multiple parcels.
Okay, gotcha.
It's multiple parcels. But the one that I'm circling, it's a single-family residential lot that we're under contract for, meaning the land trust, to buy that. So with some SUP, special use permit applications, we can put up to 6 units on that. So if slide 3, geographically, to go back to the point that Robert was trying to make, now you have this whole geometric thing. If you take a look at the big blob, I don't have black and white, but I think it's gray. Whatever's in the middle, that's the parking. So these folks that buy these homes won't have any yards. It'll be parking lot. So if you go to slide number 4, hopefully I got my slide counts right. Slide number 4, this is if they remove it. If they just remove it and we do on-street parking, which is plenty of on-street parking in that area, we'll be able to actually reproduce what we've done on Nassau Street, right? The duplexes, true near net zero homes. And I believe, just to put a little context to it, if you go to slide 7, Judah,
Okay.
That's what we can reproduce.
That's beautiful.
Right? We can put folks in homes, at or around the $200,000 mark, net zero. They won't pay anything for the electricity. But we are now spending all our time and energy, if you can go back to 3.
Slide 3, J-Dubs.
Trying to figure out how we're going to park. We can't even have a conversation about what people are going to live in. We're trying to figure out the parking. And then we're trying to figure out how much that's going to cost, because we only want to charge $200,000, but we're going to end up spending an obscene amount of money just to meet the parking criteria. Oh, by the way, you can walk
everywhere. You
to
don't even need a
Preston.
car.
You don't need a car. You can
walk to UVA.
You can walk to UVA.
Yeah.
You can walk to Dairy Central. There's, on count of yesterday, there's 4 bus stops within walking distance around that way.
You can walk to the grocery store.
You can walk to the grocery store. Or bike.
Right.
And that. So it was important, Robert, for me to kind of get this out, because that's a real world thing. And Portland started with a developer. I'm trying to do it as a recovering developer and push this needle or push this rock uphill. Actually, we're going to be making a presentation soon, as soon as COVID allows us to do this, to the city council, trying to get them or requesting for them, if you can go to slide 4, Judah, to approve slide 4, not the parking in the middle. In other words, where we can build. So not only will we remove the parking, but we're actually going to be able to build duplexes instead of triplexes. So the problem with triplex is somebody in the middle kind of doesn't get any windows.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. Except for the back.
Except for the back, So, and we've been super successful with the project on Nassau. So that's my soapbox, or somebody.
I love it, Keith.
Somebody told me, I was chairing a meeting yesterday, and they says, Keith, you just did an infomercial. So anyway, that was my infomercial out to go ahead and do it. If something like this was allowed, we could very easily produce in an area that needs it, in my opinion, 6 homes. Net zero, $200,000.
What do you think it's going to be allowed? Does it have to go to the planning commission?
No, this has to go to the city.
The council?
It's just an SUP. It's a special use permit, and we're probably going to ask them to do. And we're geeking out on this. If we can't, obviously the RIP is not going to get adopted anytime.
How would RIP get adopted?
Great question for Robert.
It was difficult. And that's one of the responses I give to people who say, oh, well, you can do that in Portland because you're Portland, right, or you're Oregon. It's like, no, it's very hard. So one of the keys was that we had a whole bunch of organizations supporting it, quite a spectrum. When I testified in 2018, I didn't get to testify because it was so many people, but I had someone read my testimony. I was there for 2 or 3 hours, and the proponents and the opponents were evenly matched. So it was not one-sided at all. You had a lot of people coming in to say, I want this, and I want it stronger. By the time it was adopted, the proponents, the people who wanted more density, wanted more housing options, outnumbered the opponents by about 5-1.
Wow.
So politically, it seemed safer. Now, we don't know what will happen after this, but the other thing people need to recognize is that this takes a while to play out. You can authorize stuff. That was true for accessory dwelling units here for 20 years, and not much happened. So part of the calculus, though, is to make it attractive enough for people, either the homeowners or developers, to do this so we get some uptake on it. You have this big fight over something that's theoretical, and if it doesn't produce anything, what was the point? On the other hand, it is comforting to some people, at least, to say, well, it's not going to happen overnight because it depends on my neighbor making a decision to do this. So we hope there's something in the middle ground there, which is things do start to happen enough to increase the supply. It's not a panacea. The other thing, I want to go back to your comment about infrastructure costs. This has been a difficult point because for accessory dwelling units, the city waived development fees. So our ADU cost, I didn't have the money, but I also want to make a point. We did an ADU for $75,000.
Wow.
All in, everything.
That's cheap.
That is on the low end because they're normally $150 and up.
Per square foot, they're a little on the pricey side.
Keith, I think, you got a chance to see it?
I did twice actually.
Yeah. So it's 391 square feet, and it's south side is at ground level, so you have a nice sunny patio, private patio, but it's not real fancy. That's the point. And anyway,
but you're renting that to an affordable housing tenant, correct? If I remember correctly.
Well, I'm renting it at an affordable rent.
That's exactly not anything officially, but you are renting to somebody well below the 80% AMI.
Yes.
And you get tax incentives for that, Robert?
No. But let me tell you something about my return on that. So I'm this big-hearted, charitable, flaming liberal. I'm getting 1% back on my investment per month. There's nothing else I could do that would get that return that's legal.
Right, that's legal. That's legal, right? Yeah. Easy Brooklyn over there.
Oh no, I just know him. Yeah. He needed to add the word legal.
Okay,
he needed to add the word legal.
Gotcha.
So it's not like a big lift. But the point about the infrastructure.
But you're not losing money either.
No, and the $15,000 waiver and fee probably made the difference for us and a lot of people. Like that's 20% of the cost was saved. But let me say this about infrastructure. Building infrastructure at low densities, running out sewers and water lines and providing police and fire protection for 2 and 3 acre lots is horrendously expensive, burden on people. Putting houses in when there's already infrastructure not always, but generally it's just incremental or practically invisible. So it's actually cheaper. If you talk about taxpayers generally, it's cheaper for taxpayers. It's a better use of what we've got.
Just to put my developer hat on that, most folks don't understand, the length of pipe and development, and it is, I think what they're talking about infrastructure is probably more the roads.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The water and the sewer infrastructure.
We're talking about wear and tear on the roads.
Yeah, typically doesn't raise up in these conversations. It's, but as you know, higher density, if it's cheap, that's the reason why townhomes are cheaper than single-family detached lots, right? It's the cost of lot plus the infrastructure. You're running less infrastructure, getting more density into that. But I think what Jerry's trying to talk a little bit about is the impact on the roads.
And then the upkeep needed to keep them up to speed.
Yeah, and I may be wrong, I just don't see it.
It's look, we have deferred maintenance all over, so it's an issue. But the additional, here's another point too, although it doesn't go to cars, but, let me answer that question more directly. Compared to what? Is this the big issue? Is, okay, you're going to have more road infrastructure, so let's have less housing that's affordable. Like, really? That's your argument? You're worried about the roads not being in as good shape. Well, one answer to that is, maybe your rates should be up a little bit. And we did that. We actually increased our taxes so we could get the roads back up into adequate condition. But it's, things are not equal.
Robert, Robert does a really good job of appealing to someone's sentimental side. I love when Robert used this line. Wait, you want to house cars before you want to house people affordably? That was a good one, Robert.
I swear sometimes I think he's from Brooklyn.
I love Robert. Robert's great. So how does it get started? So if the plan goes in play, is it a developer that gets started, or is it a homeowner that says, I'm going to convert my home into a quad or tear down my single family and make it a quad? How does this get started?
So there's multiple paths to that, right? It could be that. It could be a developer. One of the things that I'm going to try to do, as long as they allow me to be chairman of the Thomas Jefferson, and that may change after this conversation, but to be chairman of the Thomas Jefferson Land Trust is we're going to run this uphill through the city. We're going to say, we're going to actually make...
RIP? You're talking RIP?
No.
Oh, okay.
The
10th
and page.
Okay.
This is what we want you to try to approve. We're going to try to do that. We're going to try to do that. Maybe something that Robert said is maybe try to use it as a real world example, right? Say, hey, that's the only way I know how to do it.
And I think you should track the progress of what you're doing with the land trust on your show that's well watched by City Hall.
Right.
So you got a little bit of influence and leverage over here with you got city councilors watching you right now, Keith and Robert.
I wonder why I'm doing this.
You got city councilors in City Hall watching now.
What is that? What we're doing?
So, Jerry, I would say one of the important things was, and it's grown up over time, we have a lot of citizen activists. Sure. People who have no training, no background,
sure.
Not even a college degree, become experts in a wide variety of things, and they become advocates. And it's one thing. Actually, the developers were not in the lead on this.
Of course not.
Except for Eli, who was on the planning commission, but he's not a typical developer. It was really much more grassroots, and you had groups like, as you saw from one of the graphics, Habitat for Humanity. You had 1,000 Friends of Oregon, which is a planning advocacy anti-sprawl group. You had Portland for Everyone. You had new groups formed around this. It took a long time, but you educated people. And then I saw this in my own neighborhood association years ago, where people were complaining about wasn't even that big of a deal, a 3-story apartment building when the building boom was beginning. One of the members of the neighborhood association board turned to a new member and said, "You don't get it. This is what we planned. This is why we're doing it." He went bang, 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 bang. This is why. And then he turned to the developer and said, "I have a question for you." And you could see them kind of cringe like, "Oh." And he said, "The height limit is 40 feet here. You're only building 2 stories. Where's the missing story?"
Wow.
He said you could see the gears clashing and smoke coming out because they were being accused of underdeveloping.
That sounds like yes in my backyard.
Well, it's funny.
Exactly.
So we got a little chemistry thing going on.
You were
Batman
thinking
and
that.
Robin. I literally just wrote down
Yimby. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Right. So NIMBY, everybody knows, is not my backyard.
There's a lot of NIMBY in Charlottesville, in Central Virginia.
A little bit.
Is that safe?
I would say a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. But you guys really embraced this YIMBYism out there.
They're the leaders.
Yeah. So tell us about that. What does that actually mean?
Well, the origin, before the term YIMBY was developed, the whole system in Oregon was saying, we're not going to grow into the countryside. We're going to take the neighborhoods we have and build up and strengthen them. Excuse me. And so that idea about changing the zoning was based on the idea we're going to grow up, not out. And everyone said that phrase. You heard it all the time. I heard it literally from cab driver back when I took cabs from the airport, talking about the urban growth boundary. He didn't even know where I was from. So it became popularized. YIMBY is an application of that idea to the neighborhood level. Yes, in my backyard. And there's now YIMBY. In fact, there was supposed to be a convention of YIMBY organizations in Portland, which didn't happen because of COVID-19. And you don't have to be a new organization that's YIMBY. There are a lot of smart growth groups that are the same thing. But what's important for an elected official is to see a lot of people in the audience who say, this is my neighborhood and I support this proposal. How do you get to that? Well, you get through moral leadership, which can come from nonprofits, or churches ought to be at the forefront of this. Churches ought to be saying, churches, some of which have large parking lots, by the way, that could be good sites for housing, ought to be saying, no, this is important.
Tell us how you really feel, Robert.
I actually said this in a talk I gave 25 years ago now called The Moral Foundations of Regional Planning. And the mayor, the guy who later became mayor of Portland, was there with me, and it was in a Presbyterian church downtown, so I was actually in the pulpit preaching. And there are, by the way, a number of churches around the country that have developed affordable housing.
Hold it. Let's go back to that for a second. And lightning didn't strike? I'm just saying.
Lightning would have struck if they didn't do it. That's
there you go. Good for you.
So anyway, I think this having people from the faith community, having neighborhood leaders, having advocates for racial justice, and then I think having developers with them works. I think having developers lead just looks like self-interest.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
but, of course, the developers are glad to have someone else out there, but I think that's really important. And you have to have a mutual education process. An advantage Charlottesville has is highly educated, more educated than Portland. I think that's statistically obvious. And there ought to be people from the university who, I know there are people from the university because there's a woman who built an ADU in Portland who now teaches at UVA. Right. People from the university and Habitat for Humanity, maybe some statewide groups coming together and saying, we're going to have a campaign. And we're going to, the other thing you do is you turn out and you do canvassing for candidates and so on and create a sense of political obligation. So this is not unique to Portland. I think we have a really strong YIMBY community, and they applied pressure for years. And that's why it was very unusual to have it start out more moderate and become more comprehensive over time instead of getting weaker. So I think it's not as easy every place, but the basic mechanics of this politically are well understood.
So I just looked at my watch for the first time.
Me too.
And we were supposed to have you off at 11, and it looks like it's 11:15.
11:15.
According to my fancy Apple Watch.
Well, Keith, I thought you said 11 o'clock Pacific.
Oh, okay, gotta go. Bye-bye. But no,
we should have him back.
Oh yeah.
Robert's a smart dude.
Yeah, Robert was one of the keynote speakers last year when we did our Regional Housing Partnership Summit, and of course, COVID couldn't do it this year, so we're actually going to push it off a year. Anything from the feed that we need to?
I mean, we have a ton, but we're at. Look at the Instagram time right there, up there. 40 top line, 43 seconds remaining right there.
Oh,
Robert,
getting kicked. We're getting kicked up. We're getting the old hook and drag.
You are amazing. You are absolutely fantastic. You make this content approachable and digestible. It's dry. It's high level, but you make it very understandable, which is a skill and a talent you have. Thank you. You're amazing today.
Robert, think the world of you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this, buddy, and we'll talk soon, man. Give my best to Con.
All right.
You have a good one, Robert. Great interview.
Thanks, Bert.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I loved it. I love the time with him. I love the guests that you booked. I'll turn this off while you highlight what you loved about it. I really liked the concept. What do you think?
Well, obviously, I like the content. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had him come in there, Robin. Right? It's high level. I'm passionate about this. Is there? Are we going to have? Are there struggles with this? Are there negatives to it? Absolutely, right. I don't know what I don't know now, but I have been involved in this for the last 2 years, either directly or indirectly, and I just believe some variation of this could make a huge difference in the city. While we talked about this with the New Hill development plan, excuse me. That's a great plan. I love it, but it's 50 million, 60 million.
Seeing costs.
Yeah, and it's going to take a long time. But we're going to, as long as my board doesn't kick me off my nonprofit land trust, I'm going to try to push this rock uphill on 10th and Page and see if we can get some traction from it and use it as a real world example on it. Because if you take a look at the slides, 3 and 4, if you don't mind, back and forth, Judah. It just makes sense, right? We're actually going to bring one of our new board members from the Land Trust on, a gentleman by the name of Shaka, who owns one of the Nassau Street houses, to talk about how living in a home like this has really impacted what he does for him and his family.
The tax-based question.
Yeah.
This has got to increase.
Yeah. So
So his situation is different than ours.
I'm not so sure this is apples and apples here. I think it's apples and pears. I don't know. It's a great thing, and I'm going to dig into it a little bit. I took a bunch of notes down. I was not aware of basically they did an abatement in Portland. I think if you take a $400,000 house, just to pick a number, in Belmont, and you put 3 or 4 structures on it, and increases it to $1 million, the property tax will actually increase. Now, what the impact is on the city and stuff like that, we need to dig through. Was Neil correcting us?
Yeah, he's got a lot of comments. This is from Neil Williamson, Free Enterprise Forum. Dude is smart. Please clarify, these are by right, not requiring rezoning. The politics of rezoning is dominated by NIMBYism, not in my backyard. From the Parkway Place public hearing, and then he tags a Daily Progress article and reporter. Dunlora resident Cheryl Evans said misplacing affordable housing was misguided.
Let's answer Neil's question. It is a by right now. That is it in Portland. It is now a by right a by right use. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's by right. Mm-hmm. He says the city of Charlottesville's real estate tax rate set by city council is 95 cents per $100 of value. Real estate taxes are due in equal installments on the 5th of June and the 5th of December. The deadline falls on the weekend, is extended to the following Monday.
So that $150,000 lot is paying some substantial tax.
Some substantial taxes. Mm-hmm. Barbara Lundgren said there is lots of NIMBYism in this area.
Well, let's create a YIMBYism.
She says, I really love what he is saying, but just because you are not highly educated doesn't mean you aren't smart and don't care about your community. Amen. Well said.
Well,
I love that.
Right here.
I love that. Stop.
Got kicked out of high school.
I'm supposed to cut you when you say that.
Got it.
Don't do that.
Got it.
Important note.
Mrs. Smith is talking to you too much.
Yes, she is. I respect that lady, and if she says, Jerry, do something, I do it, and I say, yes, ma'am. That's what I say. That's what I do.
That's what I've been doing for 35 years.
Okay, that's what I do, too. Important to note, another comment, Oregon has impact fees, which are not permitted in Virginia.
That is correct.
So there are, I agree with what you said. It's not an exact comparison.
It is not.
But this has a lot of potential to help.
Yeah, so I think, and it's a term that I particularly don't like, but it's the best that describes it. We can cherry pick some of the best parts of it out that are applicable to us. And I think, from my perspective, if somebody created the wheel.
Ooh, your car president is dropping knowledge bombs.
All right, so
Tom Woolfolk. Do you want to hear from Tom Woolfolk?
Sure,
dude.
Of course.
This topic is.
Unless I'm in trouble. If I'm in trouble, then I don't want to hear from Tom.
Give us your license right now, Tom Woolfolk.
You're off the board.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
You're off the board.
He says he loves the show, Tom Woolfolk. He loves that. He's thanked me for getting us back on track for talking housing. But he says, Keith, Robert's characterization.
But I love our little banter.
I like the banter too.
I do. I love it.
Tom Woolfolk says, Keith, Robert's characterization of how the tax rate is calculated applies to our area as well. And then he says, 10th and Page to be a test case to advance the RIP effort, the RIP effort. I like that. He says, it's fascinating. Will Charlottesville develop more affordable housing, or will it go the way of San Francisco? Thank you, Tom Woolfolk, who's the current CAR president.
He is.
Watching the broadcast right now. San Francisco, very different from Portland. San Francisco, ridiculously expensive.
Portland isn't that far off.
Is it ridiculously expensive?
Oh, my God, yeah. Portland, Seattle is insane. I was trying to help my daughter out there yesterday just because they want to move to a 2-bedroom from a 1-bedroom. And this is just rent. And we couldn't get in fast enough. It went on and went off. It's just nuts. And I think a 2-bedroom in the Ravenna district I think it was like $2,700 for a 2-bedroom apartment.
Barbara Lundgren loves that you learned at the School of Hard Knocks, Keith. He says, that's my boy, Blue.
One of my standard jokes is I have several PhDs. I just paid for them. I just paid for them.
Your brother-in-law, we always talk about reuse of strip malls and converting
There
them
you
to
go.
housing. Seems like owners of vacant malls in our area don't seem to be as interested in this for some reason. Any good examples of this in Portland, Keith, or anything you've seen?
Actually, there is. Thank you, James. The names escapes me because Yonna and I looked at it when we were out there. They converted a mall. Somebody can Google it. They've converted a mall in Seattle.
I think there's also one in Austin, Texas, that's been converted.
I would, somebody could do some quick Googling, and the name escapes me, but I read an article about it when I was in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and went and checked it out. It's pretty cool. They turned it into like an affordable housing. They also put in there some like Region 10, those type of organizations in there. So yeah, it was.
J.C. Penney closing at Fashion Square
I saw
Mall.
that.
That just announced.
Is that on your show
So
today?
I am. So I was
Yeah.
going to pick your brain beforehand.
Yeah.
Another anchor tenant.
Man, I know where James is going. It's just I could not think of a more developable
Than that piece of property.
than that piece of property to achieve all these goals we're talking about. It's got the infrastructure, right?
It's a road,
It's a
access,
road.
bus stops.
It's got bus stops, right? And
You're close to the airport.
close to the airport, yeah. But it's how to get from this conversation to that.
Well, that's why you get paid the big bucks to volunteer.
Yeah, that's right.
As Yonna says, you volaholic you.
Yeah, they're doubling my salary. This is great
They
stuff.
doubled his salary to volunteer and change Charlottesville for the better. His salary went from 0 to 00.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I'm doubling.
This man is making Charlottesville a better place.
Well,
for
I
people,
would not
folks.
say that.
No,
There-
I'd say
no,
that.
no. I just happen to be fortunate enough to have a microphone in front of me and a couple of cameras. But
your
there is a
influence.
ton of people, and this is what I think Robert was trying to outline. The grassroots from people, everybody from Neil, folks that are
Oh,
watching
it's going
this.
to have to happen grassroots.
Yeah, without
for this
doubt.
to happen. The only way RIP is going to RIP. Excuse me. Is it RIP? It's RIP. The only way RIP.
Well,
is,
according to the folks in Portland, it's RIP. To me, it's RIP,
right.
but
I agree. They need a moniker or a brand.
They need
refresh.
something, yeah.
The only way I see this.
I think
happen,
they're actually proud of it, to be honest
I'm
with
sure
you.
they are because let's keep Portland weird.
There you go. Keep
Yeah.
Portland weird.
So, two things come to mind immediately for me here, and I want to pick your brain here as we close down. Do we have a video at the end of the show?
We do, but we don't have to play it.
We can if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're the executive producer. I'm just the lowly producer. You're the executive producer.
Do I get a business card that says that?
Your salary's going from 0 to 00 as the
Yay!
executive producer.
Good, Keith. Go for Keith.
This is the question I have for you.
Yeah.
Can this even happen at the grassroots level in Charlottesville?
I think
Because
so.
of Dylan
I
Rule?
mean, you watch the feed. I don't watch it. What kind of reaction are we
Well,
getting?
how about Neil? Question for Neil. Can this even happen at the local level, Neil, as a Dylan Rule state?
Yeah, that's
The
that's
city
some-
council even have the autonomy to make a decision like this?
correct. I think the answer somewhat is yes and somewhat no. To put my politician hat on, is a little yes, a little no yes.
Okay.
I don't know the specific Dylan Rule, but one of the approaches that I'm going to try to take on the 10th and Page, you could do little things like what they call ZTA, zoning text amendments, where there's some sort of, but it's a very arduous,
But
public.
the 10th and Page is not nearly the magnitude of this RIP concept from Portland.
No, I get that. But if you can take something like that and say, it's kind of like I'll use your terminology. What's your famous term? POP?
Yeah, POP, proof of performance.
Proof of performance, right? So we did this, we meaning the land trust, did this in Nassau, right? We proved that you can produce these units, high quality, first rate finishes, net zero. Oh, and by the way, the nonprofit put a little bit of capital in its money, so it's literally the money that it made off of that we're using to try to buy more land and try to grow this next 10th and Page and some of these other projects we've got lined on. It's not a huge amount, but enough to pay for engineering and stuff like that. I think it's something worth pushing a rock uphill.
This is a hot topic.
I think my wife probably just found out that that's what I'm doing. So
Yonna, I swear I'm selling homes. I'm selling homes.
no, she does that. She's so, what the hell did you do today? I tried to sell a home. I really did. I promise. I tried to sell a home.
A lot of comments coming in now.
Sure.
Regina Dodd said, Keith, maybe an Amazon fulfillment center
Yeah.
at JCPenney.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Well, that was it.
I think you heard about that on the I Love CVille show.
I did.
Simon Property Group, who
But
has
was it-
Fashion Square Mall,
Yeah.
is doing a joint venture with Amazon.
Correct.
And the Amazon and Simon stocks both popped when the.
But I thought that was
conversation-
in the Sears building.
Yeah. So what the scuttlebutt is, it's either going to be a warehouse distribution place to expedite distribution.
Yeah.
The other alternative option is Amazon putting their grocery stores in the JCPenney's. And these empty anchors.
Ooh.
Because if the grocery stores go into these empty anchors
Yeah, I get
in the
it.
Simon malls, then that would create trickle over customers
Sure.
for the other stores, where a distro center is not going to get
Yeah.
people patronizing other businesses.
So I wish I could remember the place in the mall in Seattle, and at some point in time I will. But that's what they did. They kind of did this mixture of it wasn't an Amazon fulfillment center, but there was this commercial component to
It was live, work, play, right?
Correct. That's exactly right. So it's actually a pretty neat project. They started a bunch of years ago, and they're doing it. But so I'll put it in the feed later on today when I remember.
Regina, good comment right there. Barbara Lundgren, Fashion Scare is not the only empty shopping center. She's right.
That's
And
true.
Melissa is at Denham. Melissa Denham. She says Fashion Square is in Albemarle County, correct?
That is
Asking
correct.
a question. She is correct.
No, she is correct.
So that wouldn't be a city thing. That would be a county thing.
Yeah.
Good comment right there.
But you know.
This comment is worth emphasizing. If a distribution center goes into Fashion Square Mall, that's going to kill mom and pop brick and mortar retails. And why it would is because it would mean the Amazon orders
They'll go
just
faster.
Go faster.
Yeah, sure.
Where the mom and pop brick and mortar retail are eating Amazon's lunch because
Yeah.
they're doing day of. So
Yeah.
I hope the Board of Supervisors consider that, and they're not just lured by the job opportunities or the new jobs created.
Well, I haven't researched this enough to talk intelligently about it, and Neil may know the answer to this. Does it even need Board of Supervisors approval?
Okay, Neil. Do you have Neil? Obviously, we're asking you questions here, Neil. You're saying
One of these days he'll agree to come on.
what you're saying? Taking a JCPenney from retail and converting it to a distribution center. I would think you need a zoning reclassification.
I don't know the zoning of intimately. I can recite it, but it's a question. Do they even need that?
Yeah, that's a good
And
question.
the answer may be no. But Neil would know that.
Yeah, I'm curious of what you think here. The rumor about UVA and the mall has been out there forever. Someone just put that on the feed right now. I don't think there's anything substantial behind
I don't
it.
see any traction. No.
Christopher Eagle, the Real Estate 3 realtor. There's a mall in Northern Virginia. Excuse me. There's a mall in Northern Seattle that they're turning into part living and dwelling and keeping part commercial
That's
space,
it.
creating 300 spaces to live in.
That's it. That's exactly. I toured it when I was there 2 weeks ago. I just
Yeah.
can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, so-
having a senior moment.
He's confirming that.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
You're another car president watching the broadcast. Tom Woolfolk in with another comment. Keep this in the public consciousness, Keith, as the movement will gain more momentum. Please persevere, and thank you for your hard work.
So what I heard
You
is.
didn't lose your license right there.
So what I heard was Tom just volunteered.
Yeah, voluntold.
Yeah.
You did a good show today.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating
Yeah, man.
concept.
I'll tell you, to be honest with you, I was a little intrepid about it in the morning. I can really geek out on this stuff, and I was trying to figure out a way to make this approachable. And you know, I've known Robert for probably longer than he wants to admit, a couple 3 years, and I couldn't think of anybody better to try to explain this. Plus, he's just a lot of fun to be around. He's a fun guy.
James Watson, there's no guarantee that our local JCPenney will become an Amazon distro center.
Sure.
They will probably start out in larger markets and test those first. I agree with that, James.
Smart
Certainly.
guy.
I think Simon is definitely property group, though, is going to look to try to fill those anchor stores.
So I want to give a shout out to James, his wife, who's my sister.
Yeah.
So she had a little spot on NBC
29.
And actually, I think it's the 8th.
You have her scheduled. I was
do.
trying to recruit her for the I Love CVille show. And she said, I'm loyal to my brother. I cannot come on your show.
Did you really do that?
Yeah. I was literally trying to get her on the I Love CVille show.
We're going to have to talk after the show.
She
You
said,
got to
I'm
knock
coming
this
on
off.
Keith's show.
Well, our show.
Okay.
Our show.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah, actually.
Hold on, let me do it. the Hairsmith and Company on Market Street, where you can get your hair done better than any other place in Charlottesville. Hairsmith and Company.
Okay. What time is it?
It's way past time. Way past
Well,
time.
we'll keep everybody posted.
We gotta get to work.
Yeah, no kidding.
What'd you do today?
If you notice, Yonna's not watching because she's actually working.
You're working.
I'm not working.
This is working.
I'm having fun. This is
You are.
Batman and Robin. I love it. All right. Well, hey, the video is basically just kind of talking about what it's a great little thing we put together about what buying a house means these days in space and stuff like that. So enjoy it. And
You got that video ready to go, J-Dubs? All right, we'll count you.
thank you to
down.
Robert,
3, 2,
assuming
1.
he's still listening. He probably not. He's probably had enough of his Yankee
Oh,
accent.
Alfred is like, these. Alfred's looking at us like.
Dude, I got a show.
I know.
I
That's literally what he's saying. He's going to snap at me once you leave. He's like, you're doing it again with this guy, Smith.
Does that really happen, Judah? No. I don't believe that at all. Alfred wouldn't do that.
Alfred is the most laid-back dude ever, which is good because I'm the most high-strung guy ever.
Man, there's a yin and yang there. I can tell you that much.
8 years. Michael Guthrie says, have a great weekend, everybody. So
Ditto.
we had
By the way,
4 car presidents watch today's show.
Yeah, I'm honored.
4 car presidents
I'm
watching
honored.
today's broadcast.
I'm honored. Look, we were way over time.
Yeah, we got to go. We
So
got
take a look at the banners, of course. Please support our sponsors. We couldn't be doing this without them. So
Amen, brother.
please do that.
Hey,
Have a good
hell of a
weekend,
job.
brother.
Hell of a show today.
Well, I tried.
We good thing we're doing the pre-production meeting. It's really helping us.
He's not telling the truth. It's a 5-minute pre-production
The
meeting.
pre-production
When are you going to
meeting.
talk today, Smith? I have
It's
no idea.
45 seconds. Let's get the cameras set up,
That's
Judah.
right.
All right, Judah. So Keith Smith, Yonna Smith, trusted advisors of the game. Keith and Yonna Smith, the Yes Team Realtors. Guys, I'm going to straight up say it. If you need a trusted advisor for the house, home buying, and selling experience, these people are who you call. Keith and Yonna Smith. They are experienced, patient. You see Keith, he's the man. The Yes Team Realtors. This is where you don't say anything. You just let me give you props. The
I'm
Yes
uncomfortable.
Team Realtors.
You know
he
I
doesn't
hate
like
that.
when I do that.
I do. Yeah.
This is where he deflects and says, contact any trusted advisser in
That's
Charlottesville.
true.
And
That's
I say
true.
contact the Yes
No. There's a ton of trusted advisors, and they're all good. So
You're right. Judah, 3, 2, and 1.